Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to FIDE Masters series. In this one I will analyze the second round of the Polish First League, in which I got white pieces against Jan Golenia. I've played the guy like 1 year ago, but it was during the Rapid tournament and with the different color, so we didn't have much history between us. However, I knew that thanks to the rating advantage and overall team situation, I was the one that was supposed to be winning, because as you may remember, I am playing in the team tournament, meaning that I have to fight for some points because our team is the lower rated one. So how did the game go? Let's see. I decided to go for the d4 move. My opponent against e4 mainly played e5, was experienced with it, so I decided to go for the d4 move, and I got kind of surprised by his c5, meaning that perhaps he was not expecting d4 from my side either. Therefore he decided to surprise me. Obviously at that point the main move would be good to go with the d5 myself, entering the Benoni structures, but I didn't have much experience in it, and even though I knew that my opponent also didn't have much experience, I didn't want to go into it because I wanted to have more of a calm approach to the game, and I just simply replied with e3, and with the hopes of getting the isolated queen pawn structure. For example, in the variation like this, we would be entering the variations and structures and variations that I know and like, so that was fine by me. And that's why I chose e4. e3 opponent opted for a6, quite a strange move, but if you think about it, seems logical. Black will be pushing d5 in order to fight for the center, and a6 cover b5 squares for later stages of the game. I decided to develop normally, knight c3, d5, and since my opponent was perhaps preferring d takes c4, bishop takes and b5, I decided to take on d5 myself and avoid such exchanges, and then I continued developing normally, bishop e2, castle, and as of now I wanted to play b3 and put my other bishop to the long diagonal. I just had to decide whether or not should I take on c5 now or maybe later, and I came to a conclusion that I can play simply b3, and then after his castle I can play bishop b2, and then if I will be able to get the rook c1 move on time, I will be indirectly attacking the pawn, therefore perhaps he will be the one that will have to take me on d4, and it was more than fine by me. For example, after h6, rook c1, I'm threatening with many motives there, because if, for example, he decides to go with the move like this, I can take, and now the bishop is not protected and I am getting the pawn advantage. So for those reasons he cannot play a move like h6, let's say, and he decided to go for the bishop g4 move. And this is the first time that I really had to think about what to do next, because as of now rook c1 is not working that well. The point being that he can now take on f3, then take on d4, and instead of having this weakness in the opponent's camp, as of now we both have the isolated pawns, and the problem is that my bishop is misplaced and I felt like it's not a better position anymore. So for those reasons I had to calculate something different, and I had two ideas in my mind: either taking on c5 myself as mentioned before, or playing knight e5. Knight e5 would force many exchanges because I would be opening the diagonal for the light squared bishops, knight would be looking at each other, still there is a pressure there, so I don't want to go too deep into the variations because I felt like it's just too much to calculate, and still I like the d takes c5 approach better, since it's a calmer one, allowing me to play against the isolated pawn. So I decided against it and I took on c5 in the game. My opponent took back. Now I played a3. Looking back, I'm not sure if that was a greatest move. I have the knight d4 on my mind, trying to simplify the position a little bit, which is useful against this pawn. But during the game, for some reason I didn't went for it, and maybe it was a good idea since the eval bar dropped a little bit. But a3 I believe was also more than fine in the end, because I am giving my king some space for the later stages, and obviously I am hoping for my opponent to take on f3, because with the isolated pawn his idea might be to push d4 trying to exchange it, but thanks to the pressure to the knight and the knight a4 move, I am hitting here, I am hitting here. On the pawn on d4 I have triple attack, so I would be just simply getting the pawn advantage. So I was more than happy with that, and my opponent therefore dropped back the bishop, after which I decided to play rook c1, And now it was the critical moment for my opponent, I guess, because he has to decide whether he should go somewhere there or on this diagonal, and I believe that he chose wrong, meaning that I think that bishop a7 would be the best move actually, or bishop b6 in that instance, with the point being that this bishop keeps an eye on the d4 move if really d4 will be possible sometime in the future, and also if bishop wants to go into that diagonal, perhaps it would be more useful to have the queen in front because there would be some checkmate patterns there. He decided to go with bishop to d6, and it allowed me to maneuver my bishop, because the point is that after bishop a7, if I played what I've played in the game, which is bishop d3, he can now push d4 and force those exchanges here, because the bishop is gone. I don't have anything like knight a4 and so on. I felt like yeah, there are too many simplifications. I'm not sure why computer likes that much for me. Maybe there is some move I'm missing, but yeah, that was my thought process. So overall, bishop d6 I was happy to see, because now I can actually play bishop d3, trying to bring the bishop to the more active diagonal. My opponent played rook c8, and I was thinking about dropping back to b1 with the bishop immediately, but then I felt, okay, I don't have to hurry with that, so it's better to maneuver my other piece that I didn't like, which is the knight on c3, and I found a perfect space for it on d4, so I played knight e2, knight d4, and now is the question to my opponent, how is he going to deal with the pressure, the situation, because one variation sample line that I can give is, for example, if my opponent played a move like this, I am now basically getting a pawn advantage in most variations, because if I take, he takes, I take, he takes, queen d4, I'm threatening both checkmate and a pawn. Actually, I put the rook in the good place, so maybe I would not be getting the advantage in the end, but that was the whole point, and because of that my opponent had to be cautious and precise, and he decided to drop back with the bishop to d7. I'm not sure if that's the best approach, but I didn't really see anything better, to be honest, so he just dropped back, and it allowed me to take on c6 and plant the other knight to d4. So as you can tell, during those two moves, the only thing that has changed is that the knights are missing, and it's important because now the diagonal for the queen is open, and I was thinking what to do next. Should I take on c8? Should I go to f3 with the queen, or to h5, or play something else? In the end, I decided to go to the h5. I'm threatening to take on d5, and there are some pressures there, so I felt like I might be getting the initiative. I didn't see the final touch, let's say, so the position is still not won yet, just to confirm that. However, I felt like I might be the better here, and my opponent decided to take on c1 and play queen f6, which caught me by surprise, because okay, this is pinning the knight to the bishop and is putting the pressure to the f2 pawn. However, I played queen h5, right? So it seems that the knight here is trapped. So what's going on? So it took me like a minute to realize that after f3 my opponent planned queen g5. The point is that knight protects the queen, so if I ever exchange it, the knight will be going away from the attack, and also because of this f3 move, I closed the diagonal for my queen. That's the problem. So after queen f6, I was thinking hard and long what to do next. Should I take on e4 or not? Maybe should I play rook c2 or f3 in the end? Rook c2 was a very interesting variation, because if he now plays rook c8, I cannot really go for the move that I wanted to go for, which is knight f3. Or is it knight f3? Yeah, because actually he would be very happy to sacrifice a queen, because after rook c2, bishop f6, rook c1, bishop f1, now he can simply take back the bishop on f6 with the knight with a tempo, which is very important, because due to this tempo I have to move the queen somewhere. Let's put it, for example, here. And now after bishop b5, I might be losing even this bishop. So knight d2, I will protect it. Knight e4, even if I take, deliver a check or anything, in the end I calculated to something like that, and I knew that the bishop would be lost, the position would be lost, so I cannot really go for the variation. So it's a long one, I know, but I wanted to show you that even in this position, which seemed like a static one, there were some tricks to it. So I decided against playing rook c2. Bishop e4 seemed also not in right time to do it, so in the end I decided, okay, I had the initiative, maybe I could have done something better, but I decided let's go into an endgame. But I calculated something extra in the end. What is it? After f3, queen g5 takes, and h4, knight e6, which seems forced, I played knight f5. And as of now, I'm putting pressure to the d6 bishop, g7 pawn, and I'm threatening with some forks on the king and the pawn. Why is it important? Well, because if opponent would be allowed to drop back the bishop here, he should be fine, even though there is an isolated pawn in the endgame, because it would be hard for my pieces to maneuver in a way that would allow me to attack it. However, thanks to this fork, opponent has to stay on this diagonal, and the point is that many squares are more or less taken or will be taken. So for example, if he goes to bishop b4, I can try to kick away the bishop. If he goes to c5, well, now that's the trick I've prepared, and the trick is bishop g7. And this knight is overloaded, so it has to both protect his own bishop but also attack mine. So that's why I could have taken the pawn on g7. And for example, if my opponent decides to take here, I go knight e3, king g7, knight d5. I still got the pawn advantage in the end. Or the other way around, if he goes here, I will now give a check, very important. And now I am simply a pawn up with still few problems for the opponent, so I would be simply winning. And for those reasons, I believe it's quite hard for the opponent to find a move. And thankfully, we entered the time trouble situation, so he couldn't calculate till the end. So actually, I felt like bishop b4 might be the best move, because the point is that after a3, bishop a5, I might get the pawn in the end, but at least I kind of got worse structure here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm also not saying what I was supposed to say because I was calculating something different. But yeah, bishop b4 seemed fine. Or yeah, maybe bishop d2. Yeah, bishop d2 was also an option. Although, yeah, what's the option here? Sorry guys, I am not so sure why the computer likes this variation. Okay, bishop c5 anyway, because now the difference is that if I now take the pawn on g7, now the a3 pawn is hanging. But yeah, not sure if that's findable, let's say, in the game especially, meaning that I've put enough pressure to the opponent for him to make a first mistake, a serious one in the game, which was knight c5. He couldn't find a way of how to protect the pawn, and he went for the exchanges, but they will always favor me. How? Let's see. I took the bishop, he took mine, and now I played rook c7, activating my rook. And the point is that I'm hitting the b7 weakness, d7 weakness, and I don't care about my bishop being taken, because after the exchanges I will have all the activity in the world. So if he attempted to play bishop c6, trying to hold two weaknesses and close my rook, I had a very nice move, bishop a3. I wanted to play there to put some pressure to the rook, because now I'm hitting the rook. Somehow f7 pawn, b7 pawn, and also this knight is more or less trapped. The only available square for him to go back is e5, so I also had some ideas in mind of playing simply f4 and maybe having this knight for later to grab, to eat. But my opponent surprised me a little bit, although perhaps objectively it's a better choice. He took on b2, so objectively it's better, computer likes it more, but in the practical game I felt like the winning will be easier for me, because now I can simply take the bishop, and after knight d1 I play knight f5, hitting the pawn and protecting mine. And the point is that even if he tries to go for my a pawn, as I've calculated, I will be more than happy, because after knight c3, check, here, takes, I am simply a pawn up with all the activity. So this knight is amazing one, it covers the squares for the other knight, so all I have to do now is win this risk-free, let's say. My opponent started with h6, trying to give some space for the king so that rook can move somewhere and be more active. And I believe as of now, as I got the winning position, I kind of started to sleeping, not sleeping like sleeping, but sleeping away. The win slipped away from me, because I believe that the most important move in here was to play e4, solidifying the knight and not allowing the opponent to play rook d8 with a tempo. I decided to play b4 first, allowing my opponent to put the pressure to the knight, then put the pressure to the e4 pawn, and the problem was that I didn't take this pawn, I didn't take this one either yet, so yeah, any exchanges of the pawn allow my opponent to maybe draw a game. So I had to be really precise here, and I have blundered terribly. I don't know what's going on, but many times during the games I have like at least one, let's say, brain lag in each game, meaning that I was playing perfectly, flawlessly, everything worked fine. As of now, I perhaps had to find a simple idea of playing up with the king and winning thanks to the pawn advantage activity and so on. But I decided to play rook a7 with the idea in mind that my opponent can only play rook d6, and then I play b5 and it's perfect. Like I win. But yeah, he just simply can play, obviously, after taking on e4 in between, rook b8. And this is the move that I completely forgot about. I don't know what's going on. How can you forget about such move? But having the rook on b7, obviously I didn't have to worry about that. But after playing to a7, my opponent played to b8. And my plan was to grab the a pawn for free, or if I want to exchange them, at least have a king as an active piece. But as of now, the pawns will be exchanged. I will not have a king as an active piece. So as you can tell, by simply playing one blunder, which is rook a7, the evaluation dropped very much. Because the point is that even though I have a pawn advantage, it's not easy to convert. I decided to play b5 now, so that after takes knight b4 with hopes of exchanging knights, I will not let that happen, and I will give a check, because the point is that such rook endgame does not have to be winning, unfortunately, because if I had like one more tempo, maybe it would be winning. So for example, if I had rook e6 and rook c4 on the board, this would be the waste of tempo. As you can tell, Ivar Bal is slowly getting up, because maybe after check here and h5, actually the king would be trapped. So thanks to this pawn and more active king, I would be having more chances to win the game. However, it might not be even true, because obviously the pawn is weak in general. So yeah, quite a complex rook endgame, but perhaps a drawish one. So for that reason, I decided to not exchange the knights, also due to the fact that my opponent had very little time as of now and still few moves to play before the time control. So I decided to give a check, as I told you guys, and after king h7 play knight f4 with hopes of delivering some checkmate nets of h5, knight g6 and rook h8, one of my favorite ones. So yeah, two more moves for the opponent until the time control, and thankfully he blundered, thankfully, because after knight c6, which is actually logical, I play h5 and I am starting to threaten, let's say, with this knight g6 ideas, if I will be able to push g4. And this was the moment that I felt for the first time for real that I might not be winning objectively, but also I felt the move that is coming, which was rook e5, and I knew that it will not be the best one. I saw before my opponent played that knight e5 would be very annoying, because opponent has one job. He has to avoid being checkmated, and he can achieve that by either attacking the pawn or by covering the g6 square. So as of now he was attacking the pawn, he didn't want to change this up. However, after knight e5, the point is that he covers the g6 square, and also he is threatening with knight g4, and actually he will be the one that will try to deliver the checkmate. And for those reasons, I would lose, let's say, the initiative, the momentum, and yeah, after that the draw will be on the board perhaps. But this is it. This is the beauty of the move number 40 with the time control. You often blunder, and my opponent did that because he played that perhaps with the hopes of me playing g4 now. It would not be the best, because after rook e4 I am not on time with knight g6, because my opponent can just simply try to take the pawn and then be okay. Wait, is he going to be okay though? Am I missing something? Maybe, wait. King f2, how is he going to survive? Because I've calculated that this does not work. Maybe he has some knight d8 or something? With the point that after this move the king is trapped with no moves, so there can be some perpetual. Maybe that's the case. But Besides, I didn't want to play g4 for this reason, allowing my opponent to catch some drawing chances, so I decided to play king f2 so that the king will not be on the g file when, for example, the rook would like to take the pawn. And the point is that also my pawn is completely fine, because after he would take my pawn, I have knight g6 now, because the rook lost control over the pawn and the checkmate will be there. So for those reasons, king f2 was a great move, and rook g5 was the move that lost on the spot, but practically at this point it's very hard to continue as black, because I'm planning to push g4 and knight g6 and so on. So my opponent wanted to stop that from happening, so he played rook g5, thinking that I cannot play g4, because obviously after g4 he would not take, once again allowing me to play this knight g6 move, and I would be winning, because if he takes on g6 once and twice, then I would have rook a6 pinning the knight to the king. But obviously he prepared knight e5, and he looked at me like surprised. Why do you play g4? The point is, he missed my reply. My reply was knight not g6 but e6, and the point is simple. If he takes now with the rook, okay, I will not deliver him checkmate, but I will give a check. He goes back, and now I have knight g6, discovery attack, then king f7, knight e5, I'm getting the knight, then I'm getting the rook with the fork. Everything worked perfectly, and if he takes with the knight, as he did in the game, I have king g3. And the problem is for the opponent that I am attacking both his pieces, and they cannot protect each other, so my opponent decided to give away the knight for some activity. And obviously this position is objectively won, but practically it's not that easy, because I have a difficult task of both trying to go away from the rook checks from behind, let's say, and at the same time I have to push my e-pawn towards promotion, because if not, then opponent will push his. So I was calculating quite a lot. I was trying to be precise, because I knew that once in the game I've blundered enough to let the win slip away. So I started with the move rook a7 attacking the g7 pawn. After a check I went with king f5, and I was calculating mostly rook f1, king e5, or no, sorry, after rook f1, knight f4, king g8, king e5, then trying to jump with the knight to either h5, d5, plenty of variations to come, but to my surprise, a big one, my opponent just simply blundered away the game with the move h5, because it allows me to checkmate him basically, and after knight g5 he actually resigned immediately. The point is that if he goes down, I go down with the checkmate. If he goes up, I go up with the checkmate, because then g6 would not work. I would then take the pawn and deliver the checkmate. So simple blunder in the end, perhaps due to the overload of thinking, for many hours, but the point is that I was leading the whole game, and thankfully my opponent in the time travel couldn't find a way to save the game. So that's that. I'm very happy with the win. The game felt like a clean one, so cannot complain about that ever, right? And let's see the review. I hope that the review will load a little bit faster than last time. And in the meantime, I can tell you guys that as a team, we unfortunately lost. My win allowed my club to get the 2 versus 2 points after 4 games finished, but then the last 2 boards that were playing were not so in such a great shape, and unfortunately we only managed to draw 1 game, lose in the other, so it was 2.5 to 3.5, so we lost another team match. Painful loss, but I myself did my best, so hopefully during the next days my companions will accompany me and will win some match. As you can tell by the review, 95 accuracy should be higher, but I blundered once, so cannot complain. Still a better game than my opponent, so I feel like the one was deserved. And with that note, I thank you very much for watching. Hopefully we see many more games like that from myself and from my teammates in the future days, so keep your fingers crossed. We'll see each other tomorrow for the next review and recap. Thank you all for watching, and bye bye.